Hello and welcome to my podcast about my bike trip. I had originally planned on doing this as a written blog, but I really found that it was starting to get a bit too long. So what I thought I would do is split it actually into two pieces. One mostly about the trip, and the second one about all the tech stuff, which only the real technical and bike touring and bike oriented people will probably be interested in. So that should kind of hold things down a little bit. The other part is I thought that a podcast was kind of easier to deal with. It's kind of thing you could listen to while maybe fixing dinner or during your commute on a train or driving. So here we go. Let me talk about my motivations for doing this. I think a lot of the impetus to get on a bicycle and ride 175 miles over 4 days has a lot to do with what the past year has been like. I've spent tons of hours at home, many in the studio, and did little traveling, other than a short hop that I did between New York City right after I got my second COVID shot and right before Delta arrived on the scene. My last official vacation was in 1998. I went to the UK with my friend Dana. The open road, sleeping under the stars, felt like it would be just a great tonic for the itchiness I was feeling. Also, I realized I wanted to see if at 62 I could still make it fly. Since on my last cycle tour, I was a mere 29. This recent tour was not only longer, it was much more difficult in terms of the traffic density, the navigation, and weather. I also got a lot more out of it. As far as the spiritual, political, and psychological aspects of that, I guess this is a little bit of a tease, but I think it's a good tease. It will appear in the Laboratory Arts Collective's upcoming magazine with a tentative title of Thoreau's Bicycle. It's going to be a very short piece, about 750 words. So this is just an ask to please support them and buy a copy. If you're interested in the arts, you'll find yourself really reading through their magazine from cover to cover. Their magazines are a real labor of love, and I'll post the link, or I can send it to you. So here's what I found out about my riding and touring style. Although I'm in decent shape, and I prepared for this by doubling my leg and core workouts, also increasing my weekly miles. I did a few jaunts with the bike partially loaded as well. My cardiovascular system is not as strong as I'd like it to be. You don't want to run out of gas on a steep hill. Admittedly, this tour was in 90+ degree weather with high humidity. I'm a slow rider and a bit chicken-hearted. I got braver as things progressed, but my favorite parts of the ride were trails, closed roads, and abandoned accesses that had no cars or trucks. It wasn't just the safety. I love that, but the quiet of the trails was wonderful, and many of the trails have canopies of trees to keep you shaded. Part of the Chester Valley Trail and the Schuylkill River Trail were some of the most enjoyable riding that I did. They really are gifts. I really think bike camping in the old school sense of the word is largely dead, at least in the US, unless you stealth camp or bike pack to your site. Campgrounds are now really set up to cater to RVs. Though these campgrounds have amenities like showers, that in the heat can be a huge relief. They are really unsuited for those people like me wanting to be out in nature, have lots of quiet, and sleep soundly after an exhausting day. The constant traffic to all hours of the morning, right by the door of your tiny tent, is not much of a respite from a day of dodging big rigs. My next tour is assuredly going to have a different layout. I also found out that weight does in fact matter, contrary to what everyone says. On the flat, yes, that's true, it barely impacts anything. but going up a steep grade, you feel every pound because you are lifting it up the vertical rise of the hill. So my best advice is keep the gear as minimal as possible. As far as the route, over the 4 days and 3 nights, I went from Philadelphia via the Schuylkill River Trail to Phoenixville, and then onward to French Creek State Park, about 52 miles. That was the first day. From there, I cycled to Lancaster, PA, which is about another 30 miles, and a lot of this was on the PA-S bike route. I don't know what the S stands for. I keep on thinking stupid. Lancaster to Coatesville was routed by an app called Komoot, which ended up putting me on some fairly crazy roads. That's also a 30-mile ride. Also, and those crazy roads got weirder as I got closer and closer to my destination, that being the campground. I also have to admit that I rode on a few largely empty sidewalks out of safety concerns. I also rode through a closed section of road, which is technically illegal, waving merrily to the repair crew as I passed. Though it's technically illegal, I really wonder, would they call the state troopers on a considerate cyclist who looks like he could be headed for Woodstock? I doubt it. I also used Komoot on the ride from Coatesville into Conshohocken and back onto the SRT on the return trip, which was via the Chester Valley Bikeway. It took me on some fairly weird routes, including one as I approached the bridge that leads into Conshohocken. I am not sure where I lost the app, but it was a big time fail that actually led me onto an on-ramp. Luckily, I was able to reroute. I ended up walking the bike up an incredibly steep grade called Church Street, which did in fact have a big church about a third of the mile at the top. To the application's credit, it got me to the right spot to cross the river onto the bike trail. The last leg was also about 50 miles and 7 hours in the saddle. All told, about 160 miles, perhaps 170 with detours and reroutes. I probably should have taken it easier on the first day, which is the prevailing wisdom. It was the second day, coming out of French Creek State Park, that I really thought I would have to scrap things. My legs were like cooked spaghetti. But somehow I kept going, and by the fourth day, the 50-mile ride home didn't feel that hard, except for a few serious uphills. So my thoughts about Elverson, Lancaster, Coatesville, and everything in between. On the journey, I saw a few cyclists, mostly on well-traveled cycleways, and I don't think I saw anybody else touring. Lancaster is largely cornfields, few trees, and barely any shade. The landscape is vast and picturesque, with horse-drawn delivery wagons occasionally seen on the road. The vistas are wide and deep, but overall it feels hard and remote, and it made me wish for tree cover. Elverson and Coatesville were much more forested, which I appreciated. Southeast PA is hilly. Many of the roads were what I call pump and coast, steep uphills followed by breezy downhills. I did not always succeed, but I did my best to enjoy the travel, no matter what the terrain threw at me. I didn't rush unless it was a section of road that made me nervous. If the landscape was really striking, I'd stop and take some film shots as the sweat literally poured down. I took along a little Rolly 35 camera with me. More than the landscape, it was the people that were memorable, super friendly. I wished so many a good morning or good day. I also waved a lot. Even though I looked like something the cat dragged in, people were welcoming. One woman in the middle of nowhere, I think near Coatesville, helped me find the route again when Komoot goofed up. Or actually, Komoot was actually doing the right thing. It just looked really crazy. She filled up my water reserves as well as filling my bike bottle with ice water, and then gave me a blessing. A UPS driver's directions were pivotal to my finding the French Creek campground. Lots of people just stopped and talked to me. If you draw in public, which I try to do, I try to draw every day, so I brought my drawing book with me, my sketchbook. You become a magnet, like the waiter from out of nowhere who starts telling me about the newly found lover. But other people just wanted to chat about bikes and outdoor life, many being older, retired men. I think the Western world, minimally, is lonely for someone to just really listen. Food, very important. I don't know how many calories it takes to tour, but it takes a lot. I did not pass any grocery stores along the route and very few convenience places, whose offerings are usually pretty bleak. Living in a city, you fail to appreciate the luxury of having everything close at hand, especially food. Often the places I stopped for the night were too far away to trek out so that I could grab a gluttonous dinner. I carried bulk bags of dried fruits and nuts, which were not only great as snacks, they also functioned as a breakfast when supplies got low. I also carried some tins of fish, rice noodles, seasonings, and instant coffee. My advice is to always carry a stash that you can throw together as an improvised meal. A dealer in Binghamton, New York, bike dealer, who in 1977 sold me the bicycle that I actually used for this trip, said to me once, "Pig out on salad every now and then." Great advice. On the second night of the trip, I walked from the campground, which was next to an amusement park of all things, to a nearby Friendly's restaurant, and I did just that. I also had a dish of ice cream. Water. In the heat, I plowed through about 1 liter every 10 miles, sipping frequently and liberally. I kept slightly less than 3 liters aboard the bike. It all seemed to go out through my skin, and even after hours of riding, little made it through to my kidneys. Organization and logistics. A bike tour is really the result of a lot of little doodads thrown together to keep body and soul afloat. Much of my stuff was last-minute things I thought of that Amazon could luckily provide on short notice. By the way, I will probably go on an Amazon fast after this for the rest of the year. They are kind of an evil company. They are an evil company, and I really don't want to buy from them. The problem is making all those little bits useful, which is largely a question of keeping things together and always in the same place. Having just 2 panniers made it easier, but I will likely pack more deliberately next time. Color-coded dry bags helped. I also did things like always keep the fruit snacks on the outer left pannier pocket and nuts and charging accessories on the outer right. By the 4th day, I had developed a rhythm for setting and breaking camp as well. I lost one 99-cent mini bungee along the way that I could do without, but losing another would have been a problem. Luckily, I became more careful. Overall, I found that I planned for the necessities of life quite nicely: food, shelter, sleeping, keeping reasonably clean, and staying well. Upon arrival at a campground, I always took a shower, changed clothes, and washed out my road togs. I carried a small clothesline and pins to let them dry overnight. On a few mornings, my liner shorts were damp, but it was so hot I just went with it. I carried one merino wool shirt, actually the one that I rode in, and another cotton one to sleep in. That occasionally served as an after-shower towel. I carried a bare-bones emergency kit, and luckily most of the things I never needed. My biggest fail was coming within a hair's breadth of running out of lemon eucalyptus mosquito repellent, which works. Ticks were not an issue, thankfully, but I'm a mosquito magnet, and worse, I get huge itchy welts. If my panniers had more capacity also, I would have carried more food. The next podcast is about the technical, so I will end here. Thanks for listening.